of Finding North podcast. Today we are joined by Markus Schork, our good friend, colleague, who we've known for many, many years. And we've got a number of interesting over the years, we've debated a number of great topics. And I thought it would be great to have him on as well, just to riffle on a few things. And as ever, this is completely unscripted. As you can see, Marcus is already making some notes on what to say, but let's see where the conversation takes us. So welcome, Marcus. For those of folks that are maybe listening that don't know you, do you want to just give us a very brief introduction to yourself and a bit of background, and then we'll take it from there?
Yeah, happy to do that. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Marcus. I've been working for Unilever the last 13 years, I think. And this is where I've met Florian and Fahim as well. And I've been part of the IT team for most of the time, leading some cutting edge technical revolutions, but then recently moved onto the marketing side. So I'm now working on the dark side, trying to make the marketing more digital enabled, and that's quite fun.
On the dark side,
very exciting recent move, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So besides like the Unilever thing, tell us a bit about like your background. Obviously, we should actually have that session today in German, but Fahim's German skills are still very
yes,
very
I was
bad.
going to say we have two very fluent German speakers on this. So I think a lot of people don't know, Marcus, that you've got a very colorful history in terms of living in various different places. So take us, where you were born and which countries you've been raised at, because I think that's an interesting.
I've been very fortunate to being the son of two parents from two very different countries. So my father is from Germany, South Germany near Heidelberg, and my mom's from Portugal. But when she was 15, she emigrated to Brazil. That's where my parents met. At that time, my father was working for the German embassy in São Paulo, and then we moved across different countries. We lived in Algeria, in North Africa, then in France, where I did my primary school. Then we moved to Germany, and then my last years of secondary school, I lived in Singapore. And then I came back to Germany, and 5 years back from now, we moved to the UK.
I think I asked you that before.
Very short summary.
Yeah, I think I asked you that before, but like, how do you not mix up all the languages? Because I know, like, in your household, you speak primarily French, right, with your wife, but then you also speak German, and then obviously you live in England, so you also speak some English, and then you also speak Portuguese, no? Once in a while.
Just a little bit. So I understand Portuguese. I never had to speak it, so I don't know the grammar. I don't, it's not really a language I would say I'm fluent in. But I can order a beer in Brazil. I can get around in Portugal. So that's cool. I don't know. I think the human brain is capable of so much, and people are always astonished by the languages. Then I'm thinking about India. A lot of people who are working with us are in India or work in India, and they all grow up with many languages. So they usually learn at least 3 languages. I think I think this is why I feel so fortunate about this, because as a child you learn these languages without any effort. So I really struggled at school when I started with English, because it was just like I had to learn it. All the other languages just were, they came to me natural, and I didn't have to. Yeah.
Cool.
And you didn't even mention HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
the other real languages.
So
Very good. Represented on your T-shirt, of course.
Yeah, I really want to jump into that, because when Marcus, that T-shirt that Marcus is wearing it's got a lot of memories. I remember when you wore it first in the office. I completely got it. I'm like, I love that T-shirt. I know why. The awesome bit is going across the box. But I think some people walked up to you and said, "Oh, shouldn't it be aligned?" And then you could.
Yeah, no, my son said, should it not say CSS is great, so it would fit in the box, So it was quite a clever thing, and I always wanted to print that T-shirt. It's just I the first part of my career was in front-end development, where I was leading front-end teams, and CSS has always been, you know, at the very close to my heart. I started working when nobody really wanted to do the technology side. You know, it was too new, and so my first job was, you know, I got a big book and I started doing layouts in tables and all these kind of things, which now nobody does anymore. And then CSS came in, and it was really so powerful. But obviously the cascading and then the box model were always a struggle. And then there was, you know, the Internet Explorer 6 and then Internet Explorer 10 were always trying to do things slightly differently. And this is why sometimes you had a result where something was just popping out of the box. So yeah, no, I thought it was a fun shirt. But I agree with you, Fahim. You know, it's like you're in the office and a few people smile at you with seeing the T-shirt, and some people like, what's he wearing? You know?
Yeah. No, it's a very. It's one of those things where you either get it. It's like Marmite, right? You either get it or you don't get it, and then if you get it, you're like, yeah, you're on the same wavelength. I also remember the days of table-driven website design, where to get the remember the rounded corners at the top and the bottom, you had to create you had to do a quarter of a circle and then join it up together.
4 little images.
And, yeah. Amazing. So Marco, one thing that I've I've always found so impressive about you is this ability to see user experience, you know, and in the true sense of the word, and how obviously that's very different to creative. And you know, I come back to this example that we talked about, like peeled bananas, right? So you know, we saw just to bring everybody on. Do you remember this, Florian?
I'm not sure if I was part of that conversation.
Let me bring you into speed with this. So we saw we stumbled upon this image online where people were selling peeled bananas, right, in packaging, right? But the thing is, it is so pointless, right? Because, you know, the skin of the banana is the most perfect thing that it preserves and things like that. Yeah. But because people feel, and we use that reference as a, you know, there are certain things, the user experience is not around making things, I don't know, more efficient or whatever. I mean, whoever did that was trying to take one hassle out of eating a banana, right? Yeah. But they went way too far, right? And there's a real nice balance between what a great user experience is like. So Markus, when did you start to appreciate or really became aware of the whole user experience? Because, you know, it's not something you learn at school. You kind of like pick it up through experience and curiosity, I think.
Yeah, I think going back to what I was mentioning earlier, I did start my career in front-end technologies, but I'm coming from a creative background. So I studied graphic designs where user experience was a key element. And it was at the time, you know, all the digital devices were starting to pop up, and obviously it was the computer first, but then the mobile phones, etc. So I was always interested in user interface design, like how do we interact with devices, you know, being the knobs on the radio in the car, or how does digital transform these mechanisms? And I don't know if you remember, but obviously when the iPhone just launched, everything tried to look as much as a real button and a real knob. And that was a big trend. And then there was the counter trend. And now we are seeing like it kind of evens out in a mixture between known interfaces and then obviously new possibilities. And this whole flat design from Google came in. So I think I was always very interested in how users interact with devices, all kinds of devices. And digital has impacted that a lot. And there is a lot of opportunity in that space. And, you know, I think it's just a topic which is close to my heart. I was always at the edge between coding and programming and the marketing side or the creative side. So I think that interface has always been an interest of mine. And I think going back to the peeled banana, I remember, you know, I think it was a late night in Delhi in a hotel, a very posh hotel. I have good memories of that. And we were debating on things which have been over invented or, you know, like completely going over the board. And the peeled banana was just a perfect allegory for that.
Yeah. It was when you saw that, it's one of those other things when you see that, you know, you either get it or you don't. It's one of those things like, okay, yes, it's way too far. And
it's one of my slides in, you know, I have a slide deck with like 3 images I like to reuse, and that's definitely one of them. Yeah.
And Marcus, what would you say from a user experience? I mean, I have one example I love to share, but where have you seen a good use of UX maybe recently, or whoever? Where is your reference point where you say, you know, these folks have really got the right balance here from a creative UX perspective and technology perspective? Is there a source that you tend to use as a benchmark for yourself?
It's a good question. I don't have a particular recent example. I think a company who's been very good at it, and I think it came really from the top, from Steve Jobs to the company, is Apple. You know, Apple has always been really focusing on the user interface and how people are interacting with the computer. And obviously Steve Jobs was well versed, and he used a lot of examples from a German guy, which I now forgot the name, but I will come back to me in a second, who was the designer for all the Brown devices. So the Brown calculator, the Brown radio, the Brown kitchen machines. And it was really about form over function. So, you know, to not design things in a way, you know, it needs to fulfill the use case first. So make it as simple as possible. So if you remember, when the iPod came out, you know, every other device had like tons of little buttons to press, but for the iPod it was just one circle, and it was, you know, reminding of just using a very simple mechanism, and kids just picked it up so quickly. So people, you know, it's really interesting to see how new generations are suddenly much easier with, you know, new patterns and new behaviors to control devices. Now with the touch, obviously when touch came in, you can see now, you know, my daughter doesn't understand if I show her an old camera that she can't move the pictures or, you know, zoom them in. It's just a natural behavior.
It's interesting one. So on that one, so I recently see a little bit of a trend, because when you now talk about like product design as well, right? And like how back in the days there was like this make a button look like a button, and now everything is touch. I've seen a little bit of a trend that some companies are sort of starting to merge some of those old features with the new features. So a good example is the recent Fuji camera lineup. They really distinguish themselves by, you know, having loads of dials, very heavy, big dials like you had on the very old cameras. But then on the back you have like a big touch screen, right? And flip it and so on. And you're trying to bring those together. Obviously, they're not aiming with like a camera for $2,000 at like kids and that generation, because they probably wouldn't get it. But maybe, I don't know, like people like us who have sort of like, you know, be like in between, because we know the old world and new world, really appreciate that, because you have some of that, you know, like physical feedback thing, and then the touch. And I think you also see that a lot of the retro design, let's call it like that, right, is also coming back a lot, regardless if it's like motorbikes or speakers or all that sort of stuff, where old designs are brought back. What's your take on that? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think you said it yourself. You know, I think it's the tactile experience people are missing. You know, being able to turn a button, because it's just a perfect way of setting something on a dial, you know, and instead of trying to zoom this with a touch feeling on the phone. So I think and if you look at you know, DJ devices, for example, you know, in the electronic music, they have a physical representation of the digital space now, because everything is, you know, cut and made in digital, but they still need the buttons and the levers to mix things and to remix videos and sounds. So I think it's finding, and this is what I find really fascinating, is finding that right balance between where do you use digital, where do you use a physical device to actually make the best user experience. And it always goes back to, you know, how do people interact with devices? And sometimes you could have assumptions, but you need to actually test it and try it.
So that's an interesting one, because like, you know, I guess we would all agree that like the overall user experience is made up through, you know, whatever the physical product is. Let's take a physical product like a camera, but then also like, you know, like the website and the app and the UI on the camera, how you do it. Like it's all of it. Do you think there's a risk that maybe some companies have sort of like you know, over focus on building out their digital experience, and hence some of their product development hasn't gotten too much attention over the last year, because like, you know, there's like so much of a push and trend towards like, oh, we need to become more digital, we need to, and hence like the actual physical product has not gotten as much love as it probably should have, and suddenly there's this disconnect. And also then, you know, if you had to invest in one area, what do you think is the quote unquote more important one?
So I have to think about what is the more important one. I think, you know, every year there is a CES in Las Vegas, the big digital show. And, you know, for now a few years, IoT is the big thing. And I find it quite amusing, actually. You know, every year there is like a list of devices people do not need, right? So digital pegs for clothes which tell you what kind of weather is outside. You know, just go outside and have a look. But then there is like cat toilets which send you messages when your cat had a poo, and you know, it's just a bit over the top. It's the peeled banana thing, right? So it's really, you don't need that. And I think obviously, and it's an interesting question, because now with I think the current crisis with the COVID, right, brings a lot of things back to reflection, and people are suddenly starting to think about, you know, do we really need this?
What's really important?
And I've been always interested in technology, but at the same time, I really live a very grounded life. You know, I've been doing my first sourdough bread yesterday. I brew beer. I like cooking. These are all things which cannot be done digitally. You know, if I see, you know, people announcing robots cooking for you, I'm like, well, I don't think I would want that, you know. And same with, you know, I think it's finding that middle ground. I don't have Alexa at home, but I have a receiver which I can control via my phone. You know, it's about, everyone needs to make that personal choice of how much intrusion from digital you want to accept in your life. And I think, especially more recently, because that's another topic which is really, you know, we could spend hours talking about, that is the whole privacy transformation. You know, people were like all over the place of, I'll share everything. And, you know, in Facebook, people sharing what they're cooking, what they're eating, and when they meet everyone. And then with Cambridge Analytica and the election in the US and Brexit in the UK, you know, a lot of reflection has happened. Obviously, you know, it's always, we are in a kind of digital bubble, so we read the news which we want to read as well. But I think there has been a lot of change, and you can see this with the big companies moving in that direction. So you can see how privacy is becoming a more important topic.
Part of the experience. Yeah, for sure.
I think just a thought that triggered in my mind around the privacy and stuff. I think also the whole element of personalization, right? So, you know, all these companies, especially content-driven companies, trying to serve you content that they feel is more relevant to you. So, for example, I bet you if the three of us did a Google search around a topic, right, we'll get different results, right? And I think, you know, it's that thing around. We're getting fed different things because of the data that those companies hold us about, which maybe takes the ultimate truth away, or allow us to decide, you know, form an opinion as well. So I think that is a fascinating area. Like you said, we can maybe need a whole new episode on that. But just going back to Florian, your point around these companies that are bringing the old and the new together, like the physical, you know, pushing buttons, etc. I was just thinking that also is is based upon your experience. So, for example, I know, Florian, you don't have kids, but we can maybe Marcus and I can relate to this. Like, our kids have not pressed a button or a knob. Do you see what I mean? So their world has always been touch screen. So they would never appreciate the subtle, the physical
the
thing,
feedback you
the
get,
feedback, you know,
yeah.
and also some of the devices are getting much better at the feedback as well. But one thing that, and I think, I don't know if this will ever change, you know, I still like writing on paper with a pencil, you know, and I know, Marcus, you're a massive fan of pencils. I don't know if you've got there you go, see?
This is my Lamy.
And I think I forgot the company's name. Is it TextMate or Papermate or something like that? Where they are, yeah, Papermate.
I know which one you mean. Well,
and they have, I've seen some reviews of it, and it's a true feeling of writing on paper, but it's obviously in digital form. So I think that whole area of what we have experienced growing up, you know, just imagine what the next generation or two after us may never experience writing on something physical, you know. But it could take its new evolution of whatever.
Yeah, it's like, you know, where back in the days, people, you know, that you had designers sitting there designing the feedback of you know, the button, or designing the feedback of closing a car door. You know, there's like entire teams for like the big automotive companies that just design how the smack of the car, you know, what sound it does, and how and I think the same is now. You just have this button here now, right? The feedback you get on your phone, you know, when you unlock the screen, and the sort of like how you scroll, how fast it is, the feedback you get. So maybe it's just like maybe you're right. Maybe it's just because we grew up with it. For us, it feels like, you know, normal, but for your kids now, because they've been growing up, that feels normal for them, and they're like, what do I need a button for? You know, like their brain and finger and it's already programmed to use
the brain is already wired a whole different way, right?
Exactly.
So they'll never be able to register. Marcus, you're gonna jump in?
No, I think you're completely right. There are obviously examples in history which are the opposite, right? So if you think about the revival of music, LPs, you know, everyone was like, oh no, CD is now going to eat the whole rest, and you know, everything was just a CD. I have so many CDs which don't work anymore. Do you have that as well?
Yeah.
So I've got rid of all my CDs now. Obviously, this is all digitized, but then people are buying more records than ever before. You know, it's like really a big
all the
now.
pirated CDs, huh, Marcus? Where you got like 100 software titles on one CD.
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, I lived in Southeast Asia at that point in time when this was a big thing, and so in Singapore there were like places where you could go and you could buy a CD with like hundreds of softwares. And it was just the time when you were moving away from having a software on 10 different disks which you had to flip and change every time when you were installing them, and then suddenly everything was on a CD, and then CD-ROMs, you know, moved from 2 times speed to 16 times speed, 32 times speed. It was like crazy, you know.
Wasn't it a joke
I think
back
again,
then?
And then you got DVDs, and then you suddenly had like your entire, like all of your CDs like on one DVD, right? And you can
exactly, and then it didn't work anymore. You know?
Exactly. By the way, what you were referring to, Fahim, was I think it's called Remarkable.
Remarkable, that's the one. No, it's a good one. Maybe now we're not too advanced to bring the photo up, are we yet? You know, our editing skills are not.
We can try.
No. It's going to take too much effort, Florian. We're not there. Once we hit, once we get certain revenue for this, you know, we'll hire somebody to.
Once we get
on that topic, we'll come back to that topic. I have something interesting in that space.
Why don't we talk about all I was going to say, right? Like back then, you know, you would get teased, and if you had paid for your Photoshop license, right? so back then it's like, what, you paid for your Photoshop? But I think it's amazing. I think I read a stat that 80% of all the Photoshop, you know, some of the creative tools was lost in revenue for those companies. And of course, now since they've made it all online and subscription based, you can see, you know, how much revenue and the things are coming through. So I think that whole world has also transformed into a very much more of a service driven industry. I think we're seeing a lot of this with cars and owning things, etc. I think we talked about it last time, if I'm not mistaken, Florian, around we're moving into a world where you don't own, but you just consume for a period of time, and there's no need to own a car anymore or anything like that. So that whole area is quite fascinating in itself.
It is absolutely fascinating, but I think there are theories, or people are saying that actually Adobe at that time was interested in people using their software on a cracked version, because they knew exactly if they're learning this in this, when they're young, they would use it in the company later on, and this is where they would pay the license. And obviously, I remember that the license was €2,500 or pounds or whatever. I mean, who would? Nobody was really able to spend that much money. Only businesses were actually able to do that. So I think it was actually in their interest that these cracks were going around. Some people even say that they feeded the whole thing so that the cracks were out there. But obviously, the whole subscription model really helped them. Oh, hold on, is now included. Sorry. It was a Zoom message that that you didn't pay the license fee. Right?
Oh, we're over the 40-minute mark already.
I think it's an interesting move, and obviously it helped companies to be able to offer software to a very small price if they would just use it a very little bit. And I think it's a great opportunity. And I think similarly, now people are renting music and they don't need to have the physical music on their shelf anymore. And that's the big revolution, I think, as you said, the same with cars, hotels. I mean, the biggest hotel company now is a company which doesn't own any building. It's just like helping people renting from each other. And I think this business transformation is absolutely fascinating. But at the same time, people always go back to, real experiences. And this is what, to your point earlier, Fahim, user experience for me is not a digital thing. It's about the end-to-end, how do you interact with anything else? And that could be, your flush on the toilet to all the way to your mobile phone.
Yeah.
Very true. I remember, Marcus, we had this debate. You took me to this abstract museum in New York.
Oh, in New York.
Yeah. And this was an experience for me. It was so abstract. There was I don't know, there was a lady sitting on a stool, right? And
it's art.
Marcus, it's art. You know what?
It was the new museum in New York. So if everyone
I must say, it was me. Like, I always want to dabble and just very, very curious, and of course we joke about it, but I feel and since then, whenever so Florian, there was sorry, I'm remembering this scene. I remember walking past the shop that was being decorated, right? And they just left paintbrushes and tools on the floor because I think the builders were on a tea break or something like that, right? And I took a picture of it and I sent it to Marcus, right? I said, Marcus, this is the new abstract art. And he was like, where is this? You must go and visit.
No, that was very funny. You've done this a few times, and most of the times I got it right. But then one time you really fooled me. It was at the old office down in Southwest.
Turn Mills. No, glass mill.
In the first glass
mill. Yeah.
Just opposite, there was the rooms from the university. Oh, look, we have a special guest here.
Hello.
And Fahim was always sending me these pictures saying, is this art? Is this not art? And it was very funny.
Because the thing is, it was near an art school, right? It was, I think that's what got you. Right?
There was the Royal College of Art right behind it. I remember
just behind it, yeah. And in the windows, they were always changing the things in the windows. And one time they were piling up all the material, and it looked like a piece of art.
Yeah.
It is art,
But
is art.
I sometimes struggle with that as well. But like one of my best mates, he's also like a designer, and he's also more bit. I like art, but he's a bit more into it, and also like the abstract ones, And we've also been to museums together, and you know, he sees something in like definitely more things than I do. And it's like, you know, it's like those things where it's like a white canvas and then it's like a red dot in the middle. And it's like, it's worth like a couple of million because just the guy did it for the first time. And that's why it's art. You know, it's like those things. And I also, when I walk back from the office, I walk past King's Cross, and there's also a big campus from the art college at Colliard Drops, and they also have those things, right, where people actually the students actually sit in the windows and they're working on some things. And sometimes I walk past it, it's very interesting. Sometimes I walk past it like, bloody hell, what are you doing there? Like,
I mean, it's a very interesting question, but obviously it's only from the future that you're going to be able to judge what's happening now. So contemporary art is what we are talking about, right?
Yeah.
So for us, it's very easy to grasp, you know, classic art and then all the, you know, all the phases which came afterwards, because we are looking at it from a historical perspective. And it's very difficult to have that oversight for contemporary art if you're not really into this space. I've always been very interested in that space. I've been doing some art myself with my brother. And obviously, you know, since the modernism, everything can be art. So it's quite a
what are your thoughts?
It didn't exist in the past. You know?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What are your thoughts, Markus, on this new digital art? Hey, you know.
We got some new guests, more guests on the show. Markus's kids are
he's
want to join as well.
So Markus, what do you think?
People who have children and people who don't have children.
Yeah, that's true. That's why I lock my door. I lock my door and I put my sign outside. So Markus, around this new digital art, I've seen things come up and selling. A very lucrative market actually is growing. And I don't want to belittle it, but they look like screensavers, you know, to me. You know?
Yeah. But I think you need to separate art and art market. So the whole galleries space with, you know, making art a business is one thing, and then art itself is a decoupled thing from that. Obviously, there are
See, Florian,
because,
that's the purity. That's the purity you get from Markus.
No, but if you think, you know, Banksy, you know, so that's not digital, but it's the same kind of question. You know, someone has a spray can and is just clever at doing something halfway illegal on a wall, and suddenly it becomes an artist work just because people want it to be an artist work. It doesn't need to be. And you have tons of other great drawings from other graffiti artists which are not paid millions for, you know, where people don't start to unmantle the wall just to get it into somewhere. So I think art and art market or price is separate from each other. And I've been always fascinated by, you know, art which is generated by computers. So where not even an artist, you know, you're just doing code, and that code is then generating work which is art. I actually collect books in that space who are, you know, about patterns and mores and all these kind of weird artifacts on computers, which are, you know, it doesn't matter if they're art or expensive art or not expensive art. I think it's just a very fascinating space to see generative art come up, and computers have helped a lot to generate things which were not possible before.
No, completely. Of course, I do it with an element of tongue in cheek, but I know it's and I must owe it to you, Markus. I think, you know, you've been pushing me and, you know, taking me to those museums.
Bragging.
You're so right that, you know, it's good to be able to appreciate that, and you're right. Some of the really abstract contemporary stuff can only be judged, you know, in the future retrospectively, you know. But the cynic in me will say that they'll try and push you anything, you know, with red dots on a blank canvas.
Of course.
But it is so relative, right? I think that's what it's what you take out of it that's more important than what is trying to.
But Fahim, think about it this way: what you said before that, right? That we're moving towards a world where you rather want to use than own, right? Something along those lines, right? You wanna rather use something rather than being in physical possession. I think one of the reasons why sometimes this still looks like a screensaver is because you actually can only experience that art on your normal screen. So I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot every time
but
I'm
if
moving.
nobody has that screensaver, Florian, then it's special though, isn't it?
Yeah, but wait, hold on a minute. Let me finish my thought. So every time I move in London, right, and you move into a new space, you want to make this space your own, right? And the easiest way to do it is to put up a little bit of like art, you know, or what do you just something on the wall, you know, something that is, but you don't necessarily always want to buy something new. And I also do not necessarily want to spend like thousands and thousands of, then I have it and maybe I move again and it doesn't fit in. So I think at one point, as soon as the technology of having sort of like a really nice digital painting frame, I don't know what how to call it, right? You could just put it up, you know, it looks like a frame, but then you switch it on, and rather than and then you have like you have bought certain prints, but they're digital, and then, you know, like 3 months you have, I don't know, I don't have like a reference to any artist now, because I probably like a Jackson Pollock or something. I could never afford it, but like, you know, you feel like, you know, a Jackson Pollock on the wall, and then the next time you feel like you want to have a Warhol or whatever else it might be, you know. And I think and then even it opens up like the possibilities for maybe more independent people, you know, and you put up, and depending on your mood, you can just switch it, and it's not like you don't need to hammer and you don't need to go out and like.
Sure, no. I mean, imagine just built-in canvas, right? It's a canvas, and I think that's an interesting actually concept, because, you know, the technology is there, and I know we joke around it, but, you know, it could you could own a piece of something quite exclusive for a period of time. Exactly. Because, you know what, that's what really, from an art or collection perspective, it's the rarity, you know, it's the exclusivity. It is, that really, you know, it's like nobody owns this, you know. Exactly. There's only 5 people of XYZ. I was just thinking, you know, how can, you know, the whole antiques area, which is obviously massive business, but also how you can bring technology into it, where you can track the authenticity, like, you know, maybe using something like blockchain for the art world. You know, I don't know how you would merge the physical into the digital, but, you know, knowing that you own a piece of something genuine and it only has exchanged hands between these people, and, you know, in the public ledger, that could be that could disrupt the whole art and I don't know, antique.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you know that already exists. And
I see. Okay.
there goes the business idea. No, it's interesting, and funnily enough, you know, Banksy uses something which is similar to that, but then in a physical way. So there is a service which Banksy offers, so that you can actually, when you buy a painting from him, and you know, he acknowledges this is the real one, you get half, like a teared banknote with a number printed on it, and you keep half and they keep half. And that gives you the security that, you know, it is a real one, and you can always go back to that service and make it proven that you're using it. And I think the number is some way linked to a blockchain. But I think going back to your digital frame, right? I think it was in the late 90s where I've heard this rumor that Bill Gates, at that time, you know, Microsoft was big, Windows 3.11, and he had these screens in his room. And I always found this like, this is brilliant. You know, you can have your artwork, and then when your partner comes into the room, she can have her artwork. So you don't even need to see the stuff you don't want to see. Same with, you know, lights going on and off. So yeah, there was this big rumor that his house up there in Seattle had all these features built in.
I mean, his house
nobody knows.
His house is supposed to be like it's like Star Trek Enterprise, right? His house supposedly. Like I've read so many like articles around it. Like, I mean, it's been super expensive, but mostly because of all the crazy tech that he's been building. So I wouldn't be surprised if he had something like this. I think it's a very interesting topic, because you know, it sort of aims at that market for people who, you know, they're interested in art, but they don't really want to own it. They're also like digitally aware and so on. And as you said, you know, you just put it up, and then you can have different. You can just have, depending on your mood, you can have a collection. It's like, okay, today I feel like whatever, right? You know, this from your phone. Who knows? Yes. Yeah. Cool.
So Marcus, one thing I do want to pick your just for you to just share the story is because this podcast also talks about business and what's going on in the industry, and we'll talk about a few hot topics that we've seen last week. But I know you've had a dabble at opening up a postcard shop with your brother.
Yeah, it is,
and it serves some coffee inside. So what do you share? Yeah, how did that come about?
Well, it's a nice segue because it is linked to this art question, right? So what
you would have thought this is all planned, but it's not. But go on.
So we felt. So I always like as we were just discussing, how can people have a piece of art and have it without having to pay hundreds of thousands or a big amount of money. And we thought it's a nice idea to actually make miniature versions by real artists. So we opened a postcard shop in Hamburg. I don't remember the year exactly, was it 2004, 2005, something like that, where we invited artists to create small versions of art, right, or art in a small format, which was then accessible to everyone. And it's a democratizing idea to for people to buy a piece of art from a real artist for a $5, which they would be able to hang in their kitchen. And so we had a rotating exhibition. So it was kind of trying to find I always like the idea of having these mashups, like a hairdresser, which is also a coffee shop, or and the idea was to really have a cross between a gallery and a postcard shop. So people would come in, buy a postcard. If they buy a postcard, we also wanted them to sit down, write their postcard right there, and have a nice cup of coffee. So this is where we were just trying to bring together personal interests in art and coffee, and try to make
also obviously knowing that selling coffee is one of the highest margin businesses in the world, so it's also a nice little
it was the main revenue generator.
So what happened
and
with that?
How long did that how long did you have that running? And
we did that for a year and a half. We were both young. He's 6 years younger than me, so he was even younger. But we felt, it was very draining to be in the shop every day, to organize all these exhibitions, and then not being able to make the revenue we were expecting. So, when we did it with the money we had available at that point in time, but having a postcard is a very impulse-driven purchase. So people don't go somewhere to buy a postcard. And the road we were on in Hamburg didn't have enough traffic for people to actually stop there and say, "Oh, I'll
Fair
buy
enough."
So we realized quite early that it wasn't giving us the uplift financially which we were expecting. So we changed course, and I think this is like most startups actually. I don't know the exact number, but from all the startups, only very few actually get to this second phase and third phase. So yeah, that's how it ended. But it was a lot of learning, a lot of fun, and I would never regret it.
So did you do that full time, or was it something you guys did like on the side, or was that like at that point in time something you planned to do as like your main source of income and like the main thing you guys gonna focus on?
No, it was an experiment. So we've always seen it as an experiment, but we, both of us were able to work from there. So it was like our little office at the same time.
Yeah.
Doing some content work and graphic design work and coding work, and so for us it was just a no risk experiment.
Fair enough.
And that might be the reason why it wasn't successful enough. I don't know. It's very hard to say in hindsight, but yeah, it was a good time. Good. And then we it was fun. The way we ended it was we decided to take a long break, so we went for 8 weeks in our camper van all the way through France to Portugal. We had because we didn't need the postcard racks, we mounted them on the back of our van, and then whenever we stopped, we were selling postcards. We went to a little festival.
That's so cool.
near Barcelona, selling postcards. It was good, very good.
Very nice.
Oh, love that.
Cool. I think we're gonna go on for a little bit longer, but we really trying to keep those now to like an hour or so. So I think we have about like 20 minutes left. So we have two big topics left, Fahim. I know you definitely want to talk about sort of like that topic from last week that has I think many people have heard about it, and obviously it's interesting for us doing this here. Like Joe Rogan's podcast was sold for $100 million last week exclusively to Spotify, which is obviously a massive thing, shaking the industry that he is taking. So I guess that means he's going to take down his YouTube show. Is that
by at the end of the year? So I think things are going to become available on all platforms, but all the new things he's going to do on Spotify from September onwards. And then things are going to be available on all platforms until end of the year.
Yeah.
And then from the 1st of Jan next year, only on Spotify. So of course they want to make sure that people are aware and have enough time to migrate.
Yeah.
So help me with that. So because Spotify is obviously an audio podcast, right? Or is it going to be video as well? I don't know.
I think for now they're only audio.
I had to look it up.
Okay.
I had to look it up because I didn't know this guy.
Okay.
And I think it's fun to see how all these topics relate in some way, because the price which we are seeing there is similarly crazy to the price for an artwork. It's just because he's the first one, and it's actually being such a hype thing. To be able to do that. You're not going to sell this for $1 million. I mean, I wish it to you, but
no intention to sell.
But yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. I think.
No, so I think the hypothesis that I want to put out there, and then I think maybe we can discuss around it, is like, I think this is just maybe the first one to kick off a trend where, a lot of this sort of like, let's call it art form. I'm not sure if podcast is an art form, but like content format. Is giving out things for free, and in return it follows the old media model where then like at the beginning, in the middle, at the end you put like you put advertising in there, right? And the question is if because there's so many out there right now, right? So many podcasts, and a lot of them are now, even the small ones with like 1,000 people, they sort of has some sort of advertising in there, and people get annoyed about it. We get annoyed about it. So is there potentially something similar that happened to like Netflix and so on, right? Where a lot of the movie shows and the movies are being pulled away out of cable, removed from this like advertising space and put into like a sort of like shell that doesn't have advertising, but you pay extra money for it, right? So like you have like premium access to it. So could this be the first one that kicks off a similar sort of consolidation exercise, maybe in the podcast space, where content will become, exclusively available behind like a paid wall, because the whole advertising space, even in the audio experience now, is becoming too intrusive and too annoying? Like, what's your guys' thought about that?
Markus? Well,
it's an interesting question. I think yes, the answer is yes, right? So the answer is yes, it is a new model of providing content to someone and making money with it. You've had the same with the music industry, right? So people were pirating music and sharing things. I mean, they've been doing this since the radio was invented, and cassettes. People were making cassettes for their loved ones with the songs copied from the radio, but it didn't really hurt anyone because people were still buying cassettes or records. And it's only when the industry starts to stumble, then they need to look at, what kind of other mechanisms can we put in place to actually make some money. I think if you look at the music industry today, even though, the ones making the money are not the musicians, right? So what has been the music, the big music companies before, it's now more Apple and the Amazons and the Googles in the world. And but that forced people to actually say, we're going to make money otherwise, in different ways, and selling T-shirts and making more concerts, live concerts, which I think for the consumer in the end is a win situation today. But obviously the musicians have been going through a difficult phase, and if people are willing to pay, I believe in the internet to be like an open space. I really like the idea of open source and open space. So I'm not a big fan of finding these way of monetizing things. I really, when someone sends me an article and I hit the paywall, I'm not gonna buy it. I'm like, well, this is a bit rubbish. And I really like the companies who are actually fighting a lot to make it possible to keep it open and to keep it equal as well, because suddenly these paid walls are obviously a strategy which are going to exclude a lot of people from the content. So if you just think about news, for example, obviously before people were buying the newspaper, then they stopped buying the newspaper because it was free online, and now everyone is putting a paywall up. So yeah, it's tricky, but the Guardian is trying to finance their news provision with ads and trying to convince people to actually contribute by becoming a subscriber, but they are not putting a paywall in front of it. Now, in the case of this podcast, it's a new business which started because of the possibilities, and I think it's a fair way of making money and selling this through companies. But you can see, I think there is a philosophical discussion about what kind of content is out there if everything becomes paid for or paid via advertisement. I think. And in Germany we have a bit, you have the BBC here in the UK, but we have the nationwide television channels in Germany, where there is an element of trying to keep a minimum to the open public, so that everyone can benefit.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for me is like, is there going to be an oversaturation of subscription-based services, so that people at one point, because they really like the Joe Rogan podcast, so they need to have the Spotify premium subscription, but they also like the whatever, like Tim Ferriss, and he's going to be exclusively on iTunes podcast, right? And then there's going to be the other one, and they're going to be on what's the other big one? STs.
I mean, there are now services to manage your service subscriptions, So it's crazy. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a saturation of that. And I'm not willing to have Apple Music, Spotify, and all these things. It's just too much. You can't
I think
use them
ultimately, I think very, very good debate, actually. I think ultimately the consumer will decide. And I think we're in this phase of all the, we're all being bombarded by lots of subscription. They're trying to fight for our attention, right? And I think, over time, there'll only be just a very handful of service providers that take care of your transport needs or your content needs or anything like that. I think we are going through this phase where we just have to have quite a few number to because where we listen. But I think on the Spotify thing, I think ultimately, I think the business model, just the traditional business model still works and it's there, right? They've bought a very captive audience, right? Ultimately, right? And if you've got a captive audience and you're serving them content, whatever form that is, it's going to be worth something. I think the Joe Rogan Spotify deal has legitimized that there is a new business model for all of these creators, whereas before they were making their revenue through advertising, so giving away your content for free for advertising or sponsored sort of content, etc. And I think he's just put a price point about what is it worth. So of course everyone's going to now reverse engineer it, saying, okay, so the because he generates like a couple of 100 million eyeballs a month or a week or whatever it is, right? So everyone's going to reverse engineer that, and they say, look, the cost per mile, the cost per click, or the cost per view is worth X amount, and it's going to be a peg that everyone's going to peg. But can all the folks that are producing content are going to reach that peg? No way. No. It is something, it's only going to be the 2%, the 5% of content producers that are going to really dominate the space with that sort of money.
Yeah, but the price is not the worst of his show. The price is the worst of the data Netflix is going to be able to gather because they're forcing people who are interested in his show to join Netflix. That's the logic behind, right? So the show has a very different, obviously you can translate it back into this is what his show is now worth, but it's it's a bit like, the prizes footballers get or Formula One drivers. It's not because they're driving so well. It's just because they're helping making the business worth more money.
If you look at, I did some stats, and I'm sure I'm going to get this stat wrong, but although they're paying Joe Rogan 100 million, the stock of Spotify jumped 7%. They made 5 billion overnight.
Yeah.
And plus, if you then now add all of the data about how they can monetize the data and everything like this, right? So I think the real winners is definitely
that is the crazy thing that has been happening the last, I don't know, 10 years or something like that. And like sort of Amazon has they have perfectionized, I don't know what the word is, like they've done perfected it to do that, where they announce like an acquisition. And obviously it needs to be the right acquisition. So I think the one where the best example was Whole Foods, when they announced Whole Foods, right? And they paid quite a lot of money with it. And the same day they announced it, they announced something else, like they want to go into sports fashion or something like that, right? And at the same time, like the amount of market cap they added to their sort of made up for the purchasing price that they paid for. So here's
the thing, right? I remember that as well.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I really think there's an art and a science to this, right? If the Joe Rogan deal was only $1 million, like it wouldn't have even picked up the media. So I could just imagine like Joe was happy with like 10 million. They were like, no, we're gonna make it like 100 million or 1 billion, right? So that we get everybody turns around saying, what the hell just happened there, right? So you need that particular, when you announce that, you need that threshold for people to just go, holy crap, like now to get that jump.
Let's go and buy some shares. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But I on the one hand, it's really fascinating to see how these dynamics work. And you say, as you say, there's a science to it, but you need to be very good. And there are lots of people in the background of it sitting, analyzing the data,
number crunching.
And modeling, and modeling with AI and machine learning. This is what where these things happen. But then at the same time, it's also horrifying, what you were just saying, a consolidation into monopolies of companies in different spaces is also for me, the beginning of the end in some way, right? So I think people and institutions need to look at this
carefully.
Very carefully and find measures to actually work against that. And you can see that the European Union, the cases against Google to not be able to monopolize a space completely with advertisement. These are important trends, and I think this is going to become more important in the future.
Well, if it's not already sort of, I mean, it sort of already is a monopoly, right? If you look at the digital media spend space, I mean, it's I think $1 out of $3 spent online is spent with Google. I mean, it's not yet a monopoly, but it's very close, right? And at the end of the day, it's three companies that already make up the market, right? It's Google, Facebook, and now Amazon as like the third biggest media company out there, and they really just started the Amazon Media Group. Like maybe they started it 5 years ago, but it really just picked up the last 2 years. Imagine where this can go when they talking about captive audiences. Amazon has a captive audience, like there have been some reports out that a lot of people now actually go for inspiration, not even on social media anymore, Google, they actually go for inspiration on Amazon. So if they want to look for, they have an idea of buying something, they just go to Amazon straight away, like even though the Amazon experience is still a little bit, questionable, like in terms of like the actual shopping experience, but you have everything there.
That's what you think. I think their data proves that it's actually the right experience. But it's interesting and dangerous at the same time. You know, the monopoly they have. There was a time when everyone had to sell things through Amazon because it was just the channel which was the most accessible to actually make some turnover. But then now they flipped it, and you know that now they are producing their own batteries, their own cables. So now if you're trying to sell cables, you can actually start, you know, selling them on a cheaper market somewhere else and start thinking about something new, because you know they will just sell cables and more things. And
there was something at the start of COVID, because there was such a rush to Amazon and they couldn't cope with some of the demand. I remember that they had to is that even a word? Unoptimize their homepage because the conversions rate was too high. So they were, I mean, what a problem to have, right? And you're right. I think, you know, Florian, you're right in terms of the experience the purchasing, it may look clunky, but to Marcus's point, I think it's probably designed on purpose that way to make you buy, or some weird factor like that.
Well, I think actually for me as a consumer, I do not mind that much, because like I just know how it works. Everything, no matter if I look at toilet paper or like a really expensive like a screen for my desktop or a laptop, or you know, it all looks the same. I know how to navigate and so on. But for brands, it's pretty awful, right? Because you cannot differentiate yourself at all. You know, like if you get the same experience, you know, selling toilet paper on Amazon than selling a pen for like £2,000 or something like that. But like so I think this was supposed to be our last topic, and I think it's a really interesting segue actually. And we can maybe spend like another 10 minutes talking about that. So there have been two big announcements again last week in that space, and I'd like to get your thoughts around it. So number one is that sort of Facebook has, I would say, relaunched their shopping capabilities, because everyone said like, oh, they now introduced them. Like, no, they have not introduced it. They have been like shopping elements on both Facebook and Instagram for a long time. But they've now really seemed to they really put it out there now that you know, they want to make almost every experience of their platform shoppable, even to an extent when you do like a live. So if we would now stream this on IGTV or something like this, right, and we do like a live, and I don't know, I'd have like a coffee mug, I could actually the Lamy pen, exactly, like buy this now, and then you can buy it from there. So that's obviously a big announcement, being able to, you know, to monetize the biggest captive audience there is, I think 2.2 million people on Facebook worldwide, right? Bigger than any nation or religion. So crazy. And at the same time, Shopify had their Reunite conference, digital conference last week, announcing just yet another step, which I think is potentially the only company that really over the next years can really compete with Amazon. So last year, I don't know if you guys know, they announced fulfillment by Shopify. So exactly a year ago, they announced that Shopify is now they're gonna open physical distribution centers. I think they start in the US, mostly, you know, solving another big problem of like digital first brands or D2C brands, you know, that the fulfillment they just can't do. And now they announced Shopify Balance and Shopify, I think it's called Shop. So Balance is the whole like giving credits and helping to manage your finances and so on, right? And giving loans, right? Which is obviously another big step in the whole like supply value chain of e-commerce. And then Shop, which is now a dedicated app where when you do a lot of shopping online with those independent brands, you will now have an app on your phone showing you, they say like it's to track your orders, but I think it shows you all the history of the brands you have bought. And I think the natural step, what it's going to turn into is going to be a marketplace, right? Because if you have that app and you go back into it, and then they can show you related products or from that brand that you bought in the past, you know, hey, they've just launched a new product and you directly buy through there. Because what Shopify doesn't have is they don't have real estate on your phone, right? They just give a shop to a brand, and then that brand sets it up, but they don't have that one app on the phone where people go to actually directly buy from. So, you know, and saying like, because obviously Amazon is very is almost like a monopoly to some extent already. How do you see, you know, both the Facebook move and the move Shopify is doing now as maybe potentially being able to compete with Amazon, and in what regard over the next years?
Do you want to go first, Fahim?
Yeah, so my you know, the immediate gut instinct is to say, yes, you know what, they've got a captive audience, monetize it, you know, go into e-commerce. But I think I'm just, you know, reflecting on this. Many times the big players, captive audience, market dominance, whatever, whenever they've tried to do something new, there have been failures, right? So, you know, Google have got many projects and social media
Google
things,
Plus.
yeah, Google Plus. All that. You would have thought, wow, if they've got such an engaged audience, but it just didn't pick up, you know? Same like Facebook, you know, the reason why Facebook got to where they are was because just connecting people, you know? Now that they are trying to do these other things, etc., you know, I think for me, the jury is out whether they can really make a big dent, because, you know, the marketplace and the consumer is a weird place, you know. So you're kind of in your brain, your brain is wired to view Facebook for a certain purpose, right? So you may never be comfortable giving your credit card out or be happy with Facebook owning that data. But Amazon, weirdly enough, because they started off in that space, you're like, they've gained my trust. So I think there's definitely an element of that, and we've got many graveyards of services and products that these big players started to do, and actually have ended it with big bets. So I think for me, the biggest thing I'm waiting on from Facebook on how they're going to monetize WhatsApp. Like, what are their plans for WhatsApp? Because WhatsApp is becoming so ingrained now in my day-to-day world and communicating groups and etc. And I feel these big players are looking to the Far East. They're looking at China and their super apps, you know, the WeChats of the world, and trying to build the Western super app idea. Now, I don't know if it'll work or not. So for me, the jury's still out there. It definitely, logic tells you that this is a great move by Facebook, you know, make it easier for SMEs to do shops, the business case and the ROI probably all made sense in the board. But one thing we've definitely learned, what this COVID crisis has taught us, right, is that boy, oh boy, does the future will sometimes always surprise you and smack you in the face saying you did not know this was coming, right? So I don't know, that's I'm on the fence on this one, right? Yeah. It feels like the right thing to do, but knowing how things develop, you can, you know, the past is never a predictor of the future, and we should be more acceptance of being more uncertain in the world that we go into. I don't know. That's my random blurb on that one. Marcus, any thoughts?
No, I think I'm with you on having not so much faith into this Facebook announcement. They've tried it before. It's a bit, you know, it reminded me of Google Plus and other. There's a whole website with Google products which have been decommissioned and stopped. I also don't do Facebook anymore. You know, I think it's really, I mean, I know that there is still a lot of people there, but I think the train has gone. You know, there are other things. You know, if TikTok would start to talk about shops, that would be a more interesting topic to me. But then the Shopify announcement you mentioned, I think that's quite an interesting one, because Shopify has been the dominating power in enabling all kind of people to have a shop, right? Exactly, this democratizing power in that direction helped them to actually be everywhere, and now bringing this all back into one set of data, allowing, you know, if you are tracking your order from one merchant and you're getting a tip for something else which you never thought about, that's a very powerful announcement. And I was very interested in reading about this. I think this is going to be a big shift, especially with I think there's going to be a trend. It's not going to affect Amazon too much because they have enough of power already. But this COVID-19 phase has enabled a lot of people to actually have little shops and actually sell their products. Restaurants are doing business now by having people coming around and order things. And at the same time, I think the Shopify thing is very interesting. I also look at this from a technology standpoint, and Fahim will know this. I look at this from what are the different services which help us as brands, as companies, as individuals, building the right experiences. Going back to our starting point for the discussion is, what is the best user experience? How can we make it easier for people to buy products, get the right content? I think content is
I think we lost Markus.
Markus was gonna drop
a
gem right there.
Played topic. It's
Markus, I think your connection is a little bit broken, so I'm just gonna quickly jump in here because I think we can't really hear you. It looks like your connection is a little bit.
But I think
broken.
we got the point around how do you serve the consumer better, right? It's all about the needs and making the experience better. But Florian, what about you? I know you have a big. I think you have an opinion in this space as well. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. So I think on the first thing is I think Markus is sort of back.
Good.
But yeah, so we lost you there. I think you're on mute now. So I think the Facebook one is for me one thing. So I think what it really will, it will serve the market of impulse buying. It's not gonna necessarily that everyone suddenly starts moving away from like their trusted retailers or Amazon and so on, but it's really gonna accelerate the sort of like product placement impulse buying market, right? So if I'm like if I'm a footballer and I have I don't know, like an endorsement deal with Nike, and I'm gonna do like an IGTV video about like my training lesson, today, and then I'm gonna put like the shoes, my Cristiano Ronaldo shoes or whatever, and people can buy it. I think this market is gonna be massive.
Impulse buying,
right? It's just like people, it's a typical Facebook advertising, where a lot of people, you can target people with certain interests and they haven't even thought about buying, but like because the targeting is so good, they suddenly buy it. It's not like when people go on Google and they have like intent because they already want to get information for something. It's really just you're there going on about your day, and you scroll and suddenly like, oh, that's pretty cool. And you go buy it, but you haven't even thought about it. And I think
you can
and if you then make the actual purchasing experience, right, so what I said is like when Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and TikTok, whatever, all those platforms, this is where the attention is at the moment, right? But what many brands do is like they try to engage with the people where the intention is, but then they try to force them to bring them where the shopping experience is. So when you now can actually bring the shopping experience where the attention is, right, I think this is just going to make that whole process a little bit more you guys know what word's going to come now, seamless. Our favorite word of the industry is like make the whole experience more seamless. I think that's a very interesting one, right? Rather than trying to bring the people where the shopping experience is, bring the shopping experience to where people's attention is. So I think that can be a slight shift. It's not going to change everything, but at least some part of it. And I think the on the Shopify thing, I think the fulfillment part, and then also that they now really become, sort of like an end-to-end provider. If you want to build out your own shop, is a very interesting one, because in the past, loads of people, in order to, the hardest thing about selling online, if you're not a well-established brand, is like getting traffic. And then you always had like two options. You can either set up your own shop, and it's really hard to get traffic, but you can sort of like control the entire experience, or you go onto Amazon where you have the traffic but you cannot control the experience, right? If you now have Shopify actually offering you fulfillment, the whole like financing behind it, et cetera, right? And you maybe even have that app where you get people, you know, sort of being, your shop is going to start being recommended. I think that's going to offer tremendous opportunity where Shopify is going to move into more like a marketplace type thing. They also do the fulfillment for you. So one of the hardest part of actually setting up a D2C brand, which is it's not the online experience, not setting up the shop, it's actually doing the fulfillment. So getting your products from your manufacturer, from your own factory into like a warehouse, you know, onto a Royal Mail truck to the actual end consumer is super interesting. And, you know, Fahim, we both have shared a very painful experience, you know, that we probably both thought that Shopify is going to be one of the big winners of the whole COVID experience. And Markus said earlier, right? It's like all the restaurants and everyone is now suddenly looking for this quick and easy way to set up an online shop. And you know what happened to the stock price? It doubled in the last 3 months, and we both sold way too early. So
we sold way too early. Yeah. We should have stuck with our instinct.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, no, this is. I like it. I think, you know, just to build on that. Hey, this needs to be the poster for the.
There's no sound on her headphones, obviously.
I know. Give her a fake keyboard as well. I think you're right. As a seller, if there is a way to automatically bring engaged audiences to your shop without you having to do too much. So, for example, there is so much video content just being published out there. Imagine just taking our stream, and then Markus will say this is already out there again. So, but imagine like you have a button now that says, you know, I'm really interested in what's available to buy on this particular screen, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, our hats will come up, your headphones will come up, the chair may come up saying, if you're interested, you know, there are people selling things. So imagine overlaying an e-commerce layer on top of like a video or images and things like this. It's because, you know what, if we can crack the traffic element of it in an automated manner, because today, even if you have a shop, you still have to work really hard to get, even if you're in the right marketplace, you still have to try hard to get people to come and view what you have on offer, right? So no, I think it's definitely a place to watch, actually. Definitely. I think Shopify for sure, out of everybody, Shopify has definitely won the deal to become even more mainstream if it wasn't before, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting thought. I wonder how much, like, you know, AI can help with like actually detecting, you know, these are these type of headphones Flo is wearing, you know, and sort of like automatically, without us even have to do that, you just put up your content, or any video creator puts up their content, and then sort of it's scanned and it picks up certain products, and then you know, the companies who sell those products can say like, okay, if it's that type of channel with that type of content, please advertise it, and then you
audience
get like a kickback.
You know exactly. Yeah. If you overlay the audience with it as well, you can obviously maybe use some machine learning texting to say what is the topic that they're talking about as well. So really contextualize that content and overlay an e-commerce, and it can't be, you know, the worst thing is like every time the video moves to something else, you know, there's an overlay of, hey, you can buy that blue baby dress, you know, you can buy the books behind, you know, so it would be an overload. I think if you can do that in seamless, unintrusive way, I think could be a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I guess if
it could be the books for someone and the baby dress for someone else, right? Exactly. The contextualization.
You know it. Actually, yeah. Very true. Yeah,
and I think it's like, but it had to be triggered by the actual consumer wanting to see those things. If suddenly just things would pop up all over the place, buy this, it would just be very, very intrusive.
And okay, guys. The question about, you know, are people willing to pay for this so that they don't have the advertisements, right? So that's the other bit.
Yeah, that's comes back to it.
Exactly.
All right, okay, guys. I think I need to be the timekeeper here. We've been going on for like an hour and 10, I think. I know I knew from the beginning, like based on our past, right? Our pool table work conversations, and you know, we probably could go on, and we should definitely, when all of this is over. I mean, we've said it for such a long time. When was the last time we went play pool? Like, it must have been.
I don't know, but you know, pool and snooker is even more distanced. You know, I think there's no reason to not do it.
2.5 years.
Long stick to keep the distance.
No, but we definitely need to meet up again. And yeah, Markus, thanks for agreeing to join us today. I think
thanks for having me.
I had really good time discussing. Especially, didn't expect to go into that all art discussion, but it was very fascinating, very interesting. So yeah, thanks.
Very good. Thanks a lot, and have a nice rest of the Monday.
Thank you. Thank you, Markus. So, Flo, do you want to read us out, or are you going to add the little...
No, I'll do it. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. If you're on YouTube, as always, please hit the like button. Please subscribe, leave us a comment. If you're on Spotify, please download the podcast. Either way, tell everyone you know about it. Tell your friends, colleagues, and family about our great little show that we're doing here. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at findingnorthpodcast@gmail.com. That's findingnorthpodcast@gmail.com. Have a great Monday. It's actually bank holiday, so we're doing this on Monday today, not on our usual Sunday. Yeah, then have a great start into the week. Stay safe, stay sound, and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.